So we are going to begin our chat today. My name is 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘕, and I will be the moderator for this conversation. Today we'll be talking about decentralization, how it is described in theory and how it's really applied in practice. I'll be, to keep it more grounded, using the dimensions of decentralization described by Vitalik. The dimensions including architectural, logical, and the political aspects. And we will then explore how it works in practice and how these theories manifest into the real world. So before we begin our discussion, I would like our panel to introduce themselves. So I would go from my right, starting with Jose.
Hey everyone, I'm Jose, Head of Marketing at Metis, and I'm very excited to be here.
Hey, my name is Chris. I'm from 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐. If you don't know 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐, we are the ones who are watching over all the L2s, what exactly are they doing and how safe and secure they really are. And I hope to share some insights from that in this panel.
Hi, I'm Disruption Joe on the Twitters, and I am very interested in grant frameworks and doing a lot of that work with Arbitrum and Thrive Protocol.
Awesome. And so just that we understand your kind of experience in the topic of decentralization, how does decentralization play into the work that you currently do?
Well, into the work that Metis is doing right now, it's going to have a huge role. We are soon to decentralize or attempt to decentralize the sequencer, which hasn't done previously by other layer 2s. We have been building up and exploring this for a long time and preparing ourselves for this. So it plays a huge role in our day-to-day. It's one of the goals that we're looking for, and it's just going to be the first step into achieving full decentralization.
So for us, decentralization is something that we are looking for in the projects that we are overseeing. So why do we even care about decentralization? We care because decentralization is essential for the security of the user's funds. So if you go to 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐, you can check actually how safe and how secure all those different L2 systems are. And also you can see some aspects of decentralization included there. For example, what can you do if the sequencer is down? What can you do if there is no data, is the data available? How data availability is addressed in any given project? So stuff like that, these are the metrics, our risk framework. Basically, we don't say decentralization per se, we look into the details, we dig into the details, but that's exactly what we are looking for when assessing projects.
Yeah, in my work, with Gitcoin for a few years, we were looking at how do we decentralize the review when somebody makes a decision around eligibility to participate in a grant program, and or the review of did they hit a milestone, did they do the work. And we talk about decentralization a lot in the decision making, and a lot of times we don't think about the accountability processes that accompany it. So directly, I'm looking for frameworks that we can apply decentralization to the accountability side of the equation.
So just adding on to the accountability, in terms of decentralization, sometimes it can be seen as like an exit to community, so a lack of accountability really in terms of projects or in terms of DAOs. Where do you see decentralization aligning with a sense of accountability on the social or human layer? It's open.
I could jump in on that one. What we're trying to do in decentralization isn't so new. Like, we say decentralization like it's this new word, but you might remember a thing from politics called liberalism, and we were like, monarchies, one person making the decision isn't always the best way to do it, right? And we want more people to be able to do this. There's a buzzword going around of pluralism. All we're saying is that there should be more than one person who has agency to affect the system, right? And in the human layer, I think there's a fundamental belief that there's a lot of potential in the world that the gate-kept systems that we have, like hiring systems that just close out anybody without a degree or close out whatever it is, those exclusionary frameworks don't allow a lot of people to get in and take shots at being the best person they can be, right? And whether it's like third world countries or some kid on the south side of Chicago who like isn't being given an opportunity, if they can access the opportunity without having to go through all those gates that we built just to save ourselves time, we don't have the time to go out and reach out to those people and help them. If they can just show up and they can get recognized for the value they're able to create, that's going to create the human condition where I think we can all thrive, we can flourish.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Although, like, my attempt into social decentralization is in an oversight. Like, I think that while decision-making could be centralized and could be more efficient if it is centralized, then the oversight is best if it's decentralized and if many people are looking into what other people are doing. And going to the technical perspective as well, like that's something what we are trying to do in 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐, because decentralization is hard. This is something that we tend to undervalue how hard it really is. This is one of the most challenging aspects of IT, real decentralization and distributed systems. So it is hard, and it's hard on the theoretical level, but it's as well hard in the practical level of how to actually implement those ideas. And like the topic of our talk is decentralization, how to talk about it versus how to do it. And that's exactly what we are like assessing in 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐, because we never, for example, rely on projects documentation. We don't trust those projects that their documentation is accurate and it's honest, for example. So we look into the code because the code is the final judge in how decentralized are those systems. So that's the reason why for every claim that we make on our website, whether something is like, whether there is an exit window for a project, or whether there is some mechanism that allows for everybody to propose blocks from 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐, every claim as such we try to back with the link to the source code of the mechanism that we looked into to be sure that it is exactly how it works. Because the issue is that quite often, even the teams themselves, the people in the team themselves, they don't know what exactly has been implemented. Polygon had this issue for quite a long time. When marketing department said something and then the technical team had to, explain the details on the Twitter because they didn't get it correctly. Or they were thinking that they implemented Plasma. But if you look into the code, then the challenge mechanism is actually empty with a comment TBD. So this is the code that is deployed on chain. Everybody can look into that. So I think that this accountability, especially in decentralized systems that we have, relies on us actually checking the claims of the projects. Not just 𝘝𝘐𝘐𝘐𝘐, but everybody else. So I encourage everybody here listening to me to fact check us as well. If we claim that some system is solid, that it's green on our risk assessment, go and check it. And if if you find out that we are wrong, we would be happy to, give you appraisal and shout out that you actually corrected us.
To top it off, I would just say that picking back from what Christoph said, the collective or decentralized overview makes a lot of sense. And this is something that blockchain itself is enabling for everyone, transparency in this aspect. And if we take it to day-to-day concepts, for example, I'm personally from Latin America. In Latin America, a lot of countries and governments manage state funds in very shady ways, and there will be contracts or payments exercised that no one can be aware of. And not because we don't have the right to be aware of, but because they make it so that the public and the citizens can be aware of. So I believe the idea or what blockchain is creating can contribute a lot to the idea that you described about that collective overview, and I think it's a very straightforward way to implement it at a global scale.
If I can relate to that, because yes, blockchain allows for it. The transparency that blockchain gives allows us to actually fact check whether all the procedures go smoothly, whether all the mechanism works, but it only works assuming that somebody actually looks into it. Something that we were discussing with Joe just before this panel, that in the DAOs, we quite usually have this clawback mechanism that we provide some funds, for example, and we allow the DAO a clawback mechanism that if anything goes wrong, if those funds are being misused, then the DAO has the right to claw back those funds and stop the funding. But this works only if somebody is looking into that, if somebody checks. That's why, and I'm not just shilling out to beat right now, but that's right, we should make sure that we do have those checks and balances mechanism actually working. Because without that, everything else is just, just our wishful thinking.
Great. So moving on now to the political, which is the idea that decentralized systems should not be controlled by a single entity or a small group of entities. So as both of you are really engaged in terms of governance and delegates yourselves, we're starting to also see a growth in terms of apathy, but also the same players kind of playing within governance. So if DAO governance is to be different than our current governance systems, how can it foster greater transparency, accountability, and participatory decision making?
I mean, it goes right to what you were saying. You got to pay somebody probably to do that review. Like what Bitcoin learned was that decentralization didn't come from the goodness of people's hearts. It came from a system where they took a little bit of inflation to pay for the people to run enough nodes that they'd hit minimum viable decentralization. So like, what we're thinking about with Thrive Protocol is that how do we enable that same system where you're paying for minimum viable decentralization of the people who participate in reviewing things consistently, so we can move away from delegated authority to either individuals, companies, councils, and actually have a random selection of people in the community that's minimally viable decentralized that are being paid to review it. Because I agree with you, if nobody's getting paid, nobody's actually looking at that every day. So what's the schedule that we have some people on that they're mobilized to review that in a decentralized way?
I think the name of the game is proper incentive alignment.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game every time.
Yes, but also I believe that this is a cultural thing. So decentralization does not guarantee anything. It's a possibility that we need to learn how to use. And like coming to politics, I'm from Poland, and in Poland we've been given democracy just like 30 years ago. So we've been in a communist state, and now we are in a democracy. But even 30 years later, I'm old enough to be like seeing this conversion with from the front seat, and I would say that we have to learn how to use this mechanism. The mechanism itself does not guarantee that you will have all the benefits of democracy unless you learn how to use it, unless you take the responsibility of actually using your rights to vote, to fact check your decision makers, and to take them to keep them accountable. And we are learning this after 30 years in Poland, and I think we need to learn this also in decentralized systems, because with this power of decentralization, with this voting power, comes responsibility. Unless we learn how to use it, it's meaningless.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think bringing on to that, though, is that in the real world, a lot of people don't have this education on how they could actually be better citizens. We have a social contract, but we understand that those with money can have much greater influence. And it's also seen in the DAO world with token-weighted voting. So in terms of using onboarding as an example, what is the pathway for onboarding for people to actually receive the agency to then understand that they can acquire the resources and tools to be better DAO citizens to participate in governance, so that we don't end up in this current stage of apathetic individuals?
So I'm just going to make a kind of like a quick remark. I think going back to the same point, it's incentive alignment. If we create a mechanism in which all the actors that should be playing a vital role for the system to be working are being incentivized in a proper way, then the system will work correctly and will also bring more people from the outside. One thing that, or a way in which we're looking at sequencer decentralization is it's also, we never think about decentralization being a factor for fueling adoption of blockchain or layer 2s, but by decentralizing sequencer, we're also creating this incentive alignment in which users or token holders can get part of these incentives. Builders can also access these incentives through different initiatives of the ecosystem and can be rewarded accordingly. And node operators are also being rewarded accordingly. So node operators, key for security. We need the builders to keep the momentum going and to have the projects alive, to create a healthy ecosystem. And users, by creating these incentives for users, we could actually see a bigger inflow that we've seen in the past. All of these inflows of users that we've seen have been because of monetary reasons. Even games, they're mostly play to earn. And this has brought a lot of users. So I think that incentive alignment, even tying it back to decentralization, can actually fuel a very big influx of new participants in the market.
I call it the big O in the DAOs, right? Like, we talk about the decentralization in the technical aspect, and autonomy is your ability to have agency. So that's really the political aspect. And what we lose is that we actually want centralization in the O, the organization, right? And DAOs, what they've done so far is maybe it comes bear market and they're running out of funds and they start thinking, oh shit, we need to be organized because we haven't figured that out. You need to be organized to onboard somebody and say, here's where you go to onboard. And what we hear from almost everybody, delegates, builders, service providers, every persona, is that they don't know where to go to understand what's going on in the DAO, to keep context, right? They go to the forum and they just need a nap and they know less. So that's not a good answer, right? And then they don't know what their civic duty is. So if they knew every week what are the votes they should do, and here's 5, like you were saying, if there's transparency only gives us transparency. It doesn't give us accountability, right? So if you ask every citizen every day, here's the 10 transparent documents, I need to review one of them a week. That's your duty, right? And I'm going to reward you for that. And if you get streaks of a few months of always doing that, like, you're going to get a special hat or whatever it is, and people are going to know that you do your duty to that ecosystem, and you're going to want to level up, and you're going to want to flex how good you are for that ecosystem because that ecosystem's good for you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said. What I would like to add to it, that those incentives, that I absolutely agree that it's all about incentivization and providing resources so that people can actually do something. But I would like to know that financial incentives are not the only incentives to have. Being able to have an impact, being able to do some meaningful work is also, and have an autonomy, what you mentioned, is also an incentive in itself. We need to make sure that we provide people the possibility to do an impactful contribution to the ecosystem. That's when the kid from the suburbs of Chicago or from the suburbs in some small city in Poland can actually get involved in those systems. This is the beauty of permissionless systems, that everybody that can contribute something meaningful is able to, but we need to provide them a path for a meaningful contribution. And of course, this has to be linked with some financial incentives as well, but the most important thing is that after a month of contributing to this system, this person can be proud of themselves and can tell their friends, hey, this is what I did, this is me, this is what I contributed to this system.
There's something super intrinsically meaningful there too. Like, people think about the gamification, and a lot of times the rituals in like gamification aren't about what the rituals say they're about, right? So when you level up and you can show your neighbors, hey, I'm a good citizen in this ecosystem, that is something intrinsically more meaningful than the payment that you got, right? Absolutely. If you actually want to show that off and you take that badge and you put it on your coat that you wear every day, you want to show that off, right? That you want to find those things that are intrinsically more meaningful than the actual price of the asset.
There is an absolute reputational value in all those ecosystems. Yep. And being able to build your reputational value is something that our systems provide. That's one of the most important things that we have in this Web3.
And I fully agree with that. And one of the things that excites me the most about Web3 attacking this specific problem is the lack of portability and composability that there is with reputation in the current world. If I'm an Uber driver or an Amazon seller, and I've been working for 2 years, I have 5 stars, and I get in a fight with the organization, my platform is lost. All of my history is lost. In Web3, this doesn't have to be the case.
And so just really quickly, just to add on to that, is that there needs to be a culture shift. So when I'm talking to people about crypto, they're still always thinking about the monetary gain. And so so what do you think could we shift in terms of the narrative of onboarding people into crypto outside of the money kind of narrative? You say bring impact and value. Impact and value doesn't pay the bills. Majority of the gigs in crypto are not ones in regards to impact or value. So if that is to be a secondary or another type of incentive to keep people onboard them and to the continual journey in crypto, what is a culture shift then, or a narrative shift then, that we should apply in order for that to be true?
I'm not sure if we need a shift. Like, the people I'm talking to, they do care about this non-monetary incentives out there. And like, I'm coming from the free software and open culture ecosystem. And 20 years ago, we didn't have crypto. We couldn't make money on creating free software. Like, money is actually something that happened by accident, if ever, in Creative Commons, in free software, in Linux, in FreeBSD, and stuff like that. And still, we created all those huge ecosystems. Why? Because we had an impact. Because we were running the internet. Because like, if I contributed to the source code of some platform, I knew that that I could later tell my friends, hey, all those systems, all those servers are running my code, and that is my input to the society. And this is hugely valuable. This is something that you can't pay in money for. So, and like, this is the shift that I would be looking for. Not just the monetary value, but the value of the brick that you are putting into the future society.
That's a great point. And I want to kind of like highlight that there will never be such a thing as like no monetary value involved. I think there's always going to be at some extent. But by being able to develop a solid reputation, like you were saying, being proud of what you do, like you are not looking to extract that monetary value per se, but those achievements and that reputation can take you to obtain that monetary value in the end.
Yeah, I'm really getting excited about this idea of minimizing friction. Actually, it was something you said that kind of inspired me around it. It was like, why don't we have 100% of people being accepted for grants? And at first I was like, well, that's stupid. How would we accept 100% of people? And then I sat there for like a day, as like usually I do with like comments like that. It was like, oh, if we had basic requirements and a starting level and some pathway to something at the end, like, I mean, I was talking about it yesterday with like the example of a leprechaun. Like, everybody understands the idea of the leprechaun. He wants the pot of gold at the end, and there's a rainbow. It's the pathway he takes to get there, right? And usually our grants and everything that we do, it's like this very transactional thing where we're going, here's some money, don't fuck it up. And we're not saying, here's some money, let us help you grow, and let us coach you and build you to be better. And there is that, like, the pot of gold is whatever's meaningful to that person, right? Like, it's not necessarily the money. It's the autonomy. It's the ability to travel and live the way you want to. It's the ability for that kid to go and participate without being, gated out of the system for reasons that are just like reversion to the mean, like, I'm going to take this stupid criteria and like cut out 80 of the applications because I need to cut out 80 of them because I don't have the human labor hours to look at them. So I'm going to require a degree, not because I think the best person's in there, because I don't have the time to look through this shit, right? So we have all these gating mechanisms. That's the culture change we need to change, is that you can step in and get the value that you put in.
And we are the only ecosystem where some monkey or penguin could be more influential than some celebrity.
Or a blueberry.
So our time is up. Thank you so much to our panel for this lively discussion. Thank you all to have joined, to listen in, and that's it.